I'm Hillary with Dominion Tea, and today we're going to talk about how to make matcha every day. I'm not going to touch on the Japanese tea ceremony, which in and of itself would be a very long YouTube video. But what I will do is give you a little bit of history, what kind of equipment you might need, why the equipment is the way it is, and some tips and tricks on how to do it quickly so matcha can become part of your daily tea routine. So let's talk a little bit about that history. Matcha would have come into play around the Tang Dynasty in China. It would have traveled via the Buddhist monks from China into Japan. Due to isolationist policies, after that transfer of knowledge via the Buddhist monks, Japan and China stopped talking to each other. And Japan went on continuing the tradition of powdered tea, adding in a steaming process that China did not do. And China went the route of large loose leaf teas. And so matcha was born. And with that, let's talk equipment. All right, so when we talk about matcha, the first thing we're going to talk about are bowls. You need a bowl because you're going to whisk. You're not going to have an easy time whisking in a mug just because you don't have diameter. So there's a couple of different bowls in the matcha world. Your thicker, heavier, deeper bowls are called winter bowls. If you think about the origin of matcha and the Buddhist monasteries, they didn't have heating or air conditioning. So the winter bowls were meant for you to heat up and hold the warmth of that tea while you drank it. In the middle is a little bit more of a modern version. So this is a travel bowl. When you get into tea in the Japanese culture as well as the Chinese, the idea is to go out into nature and to enjoy it. So this bowl is almost a combination between your winter bowl and what is your summer bowl. So, okay, those monasteries didn't have heat. They didn't have AC either. So in the summer, when it would get hot, you wanted to disperse the heat of your tea. So you got it wider and thinner. Your matcha bowl is your choice. You can have the seasonal bowls, you can have the travel bowl, you can go use your own. But the idea is when you see these out in the market, know the difference between your winter and your summer and your modern day travel. Now, moving on from the bowls, there's the bamboo whisk. This is actually a really important tool. Those tiny little tines have been refined over thousands of years. They're the perfect width to help get that powder apart. You will also have your scoop. Yes, this is pretty, it's fun to play with. If you're dying to know what it is, you really need to think about, it's 1/4 of a teaspoon roughly when you scoop it on there, but you'll see me use it here shortly. And last but not least, there are strainers because you're gonna wanna strain your matcha powder before you try to blend it. The reason you wanna do this is powder sticks to itself a lot. And these strainers come very fine mesh. You can do a basic one. There's one that even comes with jars and a proper rake, so you can go back and forth. It's to help your life and make it easier for you to blend when you're working in these bowls. So now that you know what all the equipment is, let's take you through how to make matcha. So the first step in making matcha is to warm your bowl and wet your whisk. You're going to be very tempted to skip this step. Don't do it. By warming the bowl and getting the whisk wet, you're going to have an easier time getting the matcha to distribute. So just warm them up, get it a little wet, and then you're going to empty your bowl and add in your matcha. All right, now that we have our bowl warm and our whisk warm, we're going to put in our matcha. I'm putting in 2 scoops of matcha. This is called thin matcha. There is a version of matcha called thick matcha where you're going to put in 4 of these scoops. We're going to add in our water. And then we're going to start to whisk. Now there's a couple of techniques you need to know about making matcha. The first one is you're going to aim for roughly 4 ounces of water in here for thin. But you're going to want to whisk all in your wrist. And you're going to start with little M's. Okay, and so from where I'm facing, it's an M. From your view, it's kind of a W. And what you're trying to do here is get and start to form uniform bubbles around the edges of your matcha. Now, what you will notice is that you're going to start to have matcha kind of cling to the side of the bowl. So there's a second technique. And what you do is you take your whisk and you go around the outside of the bowl, and you kind of swish it around, and then you do an X to wash off, and you do it again. And when you watch it in the ceremony, it's done very particularly. It's always counterclockwise. You don't necessarily have to be. It's a personal preference. This is your bowl of matcha in the morning. You're not trying to duplicate the ceremony. So How long do you whisk? That is always the biggest question. Which you whisk until you get the right amount of bubbles. And what is the right amount of bubbles? Well, in some cases, I'm going to tell you it's personal preference. And it's also a function of how much grit are you willing to tolerate. So the matcha doesn't actually dissolve in the water, it disperses. And it is so finely ground that it can disperse to the point that it does become creamy-like. So it feels like it dissolved, but it really didn't. What you're looking for, if you're doing this, is you want to, when you pull your whisk out, see the bubbles start to uniformly go across. Now, I am making ceremonial grade matcha, so my bubbles are going to go straight across the entire bowl and the entire face of the matcha. Everyday matcha does not always do this. It will just circle around the outside. I can keep going and keep forming more bubbles. Now, give or take your preference, you can be at this for several minutes, or you can shortcut it a little bit and just say, you know what, I don't need to go that far. What you're ultimately looking for, if you want to be very specific about it, is you want uniform bubbles. Now, I will tell you, that is really hard to do without a lot of practice. I have found a couple of tricks over the years. If you're really wanting uniform bubbles, take your whisk out and just kind of go after the larger bubbles, and they will break down using that little M. They will start to break down and form smaller ones that match. And so you can work your way towards uniform. But ideally, what you're looking for ultimately is you want a uniform circle of bubbles, as uniform as you want, along the outside edge, and then you're ready to drink. So I've always gotten a couple questions. Can I do this in a blender, right? Your good old friend, the stick blender. Well, that depends on how much matcha you're willing to drink. Because the problem is with 4 ounces of water, that's rarely enough liquid for one of these. And if you start to go into 8 or 12 or 16 ounces, you're bringing in a lot of tea. Because keep in mind, you're consuming the leaf with matcha, unlike your other teas where you're just getting what comes out in the brew. So you might want to test that and see. I'm not saying you can't do it. You absolutely can. You will still end up with clumps on a hand blender unless you're going to stick it in with other ingredients like a fruit smoothie. So when you're done with this, you have a choice. You can drink directly out of a bowl, which is a whole heck of a lot of fun to do, so don't write it off immediately. Or you can pour it off into a mug and take it along with you to go wherever you need to. And so that is the basic run of matcha. Now, I quickly mentioned ceremonial versus everyday. They're very hard sometimes to see the difference. The flavor takes practice to distinguish between the two. What you will learn over time is ceremonial grade matcha has got an umami finish that is not always present in the everyday matcha. But you also have to keep in mind ceremonial grade has got multiple grades and everyday matcha has multiple grades. So it's a little complicated to get into an exact flavor profile. What I will say is everything we've prepped here today comes out of Japan. And why do we do Japan? They've been doing this the longest. Yes, the Chinese did it first, but they gave it up for centuries. And now that they're back at it, they do make matcha, but their technique for making it is different than Japanese. So you're gonna end up with a different flavor profile. Instead of steaming and then drying, the Chinese dry and then steam and then dry again. And it causes a different color, and it also changes the flavor profile. So if you're out looking for matcha, make sure you know what country it's coming from because it's going to make a big difference in your flavor profile. So now that you've got a little bit of shortcuts, have some fun exploring and playing. For those of you who approach matcha with the idea of health, I'll be the first one to break the news to you. You're going to negate those health benefits if you put sugar in it. So this is an acquired taste. Good luck enjoying it. But I will tell you, you can absolutely get there. So if you've got any questions about what to do with your matcha, feel free to stick them in the comments. Otherwise, enjoy exploring this wonderful tea. We hope you enjoyed learning more about tea with us. Hit the subscribe button so that you can be notified when we add more videos to our channel. And check out the highlighted videos to learn even more about tea. And last but not least, you can check out all of the teas we talk about in our videos at dominiontea.com.